The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Have members take their conversations off the floor. Do I have a script here? I'll call on him and the House will be in order. For what purpose? What purpose the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 466, I move to suspend the rules and pass House Joint Resolution 2 as amended, proposing a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution.
The clerk will report the title of the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 2. Joint resolution proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States.
Pursuant to House Resolution 466, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, will each control 2 hours and 30 minutes. The House will be in order. I ask members to take their conversations off the floor and out of the well. I ask members to take their conversations out of the aisle. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on House Joint Resolution 2 as amended, currently under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for as much time as he may consume, but the gentleman will suspend. The House will be in order. I ask members to take their conversations off the floor and out of the well. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Americans want the federal government to stop excessive government spending and reduce the federal deficit. The last time the budget was balanced was during the Clinton administration, when Republicans in Congress passed the first balanced budget in over 25 years. Meanwhile, the federal debt has climbed from less than $400 billion in 1970 to over $15 trillion today.
Ben, I would ask members on the minority side at the rear of the chamber to take your conversations off the floor. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Mr. Speaker, President Obama has set the wrong kind of new record. The national debt has increased faster under his administration than under any other president in history. America cannot continue to run huge federal budget deficits. Financing federal overspending through continued borrowing threatens to drown Americans in high taxes and heavy debt, and it puts a drag on the economy. The federal government now borrows 42 cents for every dollar it spends. No family, no community, no business, no country can sustain that kind of excessive spending. That is the road to insolvency. Unfortunately, this kind of bad behavior has gone unchecked for so long that it has become the norm. The federal government has been on a decades-long shopping spree, racking up the bills and leaving them for future generations. We need a constitutional mandate to force both the President and Congress to adopt annual budgets that spend no more than the government takes in. Only a balanced budget constitutional amendment will save us from unending federal deficits. Just as both parties have joint responsibility for the deficit, we must jointly take responsibility for controlling the deficit by passing the balanced budget amendment. We came very close to passing this balanced budget amendment in 1995, falling just one vote short in the Senate of the required two-thirds majority. In that Congress, the amendment was supported by Congressman Hoyer, now Minority Whip, Congressman Clyburn, now Assistant Democratic Leader, and Senator Joseph Biden, now Vice President. As then Senator Biden stated in support of the balanced budget amendment, quote, "In recent decades, we have faced the problem that we do not seem to be able to solve. We cannot balance our budget, or more correctly, we will not. The decision to encumber future generations with financial obligations is one that can rightly be considered among the fundamental choices addressed in the Constitution," end quote. Congress is way overdue to pass a balanced budget amendment, and the American people want it. Polls show that 74% are in favor of a balanced budget amendment. It took less than a generation for us to get into this mess. We need a fiscal fix that will now last for generations. If we want to make lasting cuts to federal spending, a constitutional amendment is the only solution. It is our last line of defense against Congress's unending desire to overspend and overtax. Thomas Jefferson believed that, quote, "the public debt is the greatest of dangers to be feared." Jefferson wished, quote, "it were possible to obtain a single amendment to our Constitution, taking from the federal government the power of borrowing," end quote. It is time that we listen to Thomas Jefferson and pass a constitutional amendment to end the federal government's continuous deficit spending. We must solve our debt crisis to save the future. I want to thank Mr. Goodlatte, the gentleman from Virginia, for introducing the version of the balanced budget amendment we are considering today, and for his tireless work in support of the amendment. Since the 1930s, dozens of proposals offered by both Democrats and Republicans have called for constitutional amendments to address federal budget deficits. We have the opportunity today to take the first step toward making a balanced budget a reality by passing this legislation. The American people have not given Congress a blank check. Let's demonstrate to the American people that Congress can be fiscally responsible and get our economic house in order. Borrowing 42 cents for every dollar the government spends and setting a new deficit record is not the road to prosperity. Let's put our country first and pass this amendment. Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves his time. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this balanced budget constitutional amendment is one that surprises me, and very little surprises me anymore. But for us to be seriously on this day and this time considering an amendment to the Constitution of the United States that would destroy jobs, that would drastically cut Medicare and Social Security, and give members of the federal judiciary the right to raise taxes and make spending decisions for us is relatively shocking to me, and I am very much opposed to it. I want to engage my dear friend, the chairman of the committee, in the exchange of views on this. But let's start off the discussion with this reality. This is not 1995. And that's why so many people that supported the amendment then have changed their minds now. And they will explain this as they go along. And I would like now, Mr. Speaker, to yield to the former chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee, Jerry Nadler, for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this misguided attempt to amend our Constitution. It is both bad economic policy and bad constitutional policy. Let's start with the basics. When balancing your budget and paying down your debts is important, and we did that under President Clinton, a balanced budget every year, regardless of the circumstances, even when facing economic crisis, a natural disaster, or a terrorist threat, is economically dangerous. We would be risking economic ruin if we enshrined this unyielding rule in the Constitution and shackled future generations to one particular economic policy preference that does not work at all times and in all situations. In general, the economists tell us, in good times, you should have a balanced budget and pay down the debt. In bad times, when a recession increases demands on government and tax revenues fall, or in emergencies, you need to be able to run a deficit. The nonpartisan economists at Macroeconomics Advisors, for example, tell us that if this amendment were in effect next year, in fiscal year 2012, it would eliminate 15 million jobs and double the unemployment rate. And this amendment would shackle future generations in such situations. One thing we can be sure of, this amendment will devastate the economy, destroy Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, cripple our government's ability to deal with national emergencies, to maintain our vital infrastructure, or deal with new challenges as they emerge. Let's be clear on what this amendment does not do. It does not require us to balance the budget the way states or businesses or families do. They are not required to spend no more than that year's income. Families borrow money. If they were told, you must pay cash. You want to buy a house? Pay cash. You want to buy the car? Pay cash. They wouldn't have the house. They wouldn't have the car. The standard of living would be much lower. States borrow money. States have balanced budget amendments generally, but those amendments refer to their operating budgets. They borrow money for their capital budgets to build bridges and roads and highways. The budget of the United States does not make such a distinction. And this balanced budget amendments would say you can never borrow money. You cannot borrow money to build highways, to make investments, to deal with the economy in a recession. It doesn't make sense. Similarly, we collect payroll taxes to pay for Social Security benefits. We collect gasoline taxes to pay for transportation infrastructure, and we carry over unexpended funds in those trust funds from prior years. Because they were paid in prior years, those revenues would not count, only the expenditures. If you paid $100 in Social Security taxes in 1960 and drew $100 of benefits in 2011, the budget would show a deficit of $100 because the tax was paid in a different year, even though it's the same money. No matter how much money we had put away for a rainy day, we would still be limited to spending no more than that year's tax revenues. No one in this room balances their budget that way. What happens when you retire and your income drops? Do you not touch your savings because it didn't come in during that year? Of course not. You're not running a deficit when your expenses equals that year's income plus savings. I know we have a lot of millionaires here, but did anyone pay cash for their home? But this amendment enshrines crazy bookkeeping and distorted policies into our Constitution. So all the chatter about states and businesses and families balancing their budgets is true, but it's irrelevant to what this amendment actually says. Because this is a constitutional amendment, it would give federal judges, those same unelected, life-tenured federal judges my Republican friends always complain about, the power to cut spending and raise taxes. Anyone could bring a lawsuit if the budget doesn't balance, if the estimated receipts, in his opinion, didn't match the estimated tax revenues. And a judge would have to decide whose revenue and expenditure estimates were correct, and if they were if they didn't match in the judge's opinion, the judge would have to decide to increase taxes or to cut expenditures and which expenditures to cut, an unelected judge. How is that possible? It's possible because as a constitutional amendment, the courts will have to have the power to enforce it, just as they do the rest of the Constitution. The Constitution now gives the power to tax in the first instance to the House. All revenue measures must originate here. That's because we are closest to the people, the people's house. This should go as far away from that wise decision as you possibly can by giving that power ultimately to the only part of government that is not elected by the people and that is not accountable at the ballot box, the judiciary. The courts could also order reduction in spending to enforce a balanced budget. They could slash military spending or Social Security or eliminate disaster relief. The voters, the Congress, would be powerless to stop such decisions. Is this really someone's idea of constitutional conservatism? This amendment also isn't limited to a requirement that we balance the budget. It imposes a 3/5 supermajority requirement to raise the debt ceiling. When we considered that in 1995, it never occurred to anyone that any member of Congress, much less a majority, would consider allowing the United States to default on its debt. It wasn't just considered crazy, it was considered impossible. Today, unfortunately, we live in a different world. This year, for the first time in American history, we nearly defaulted on the full faith and credit of the United States, and for the first time in our history, saw our top credit rating downgraded. And that was for difficulty in getting a simple majority. A 3/5 majority would make it much more difficult. Is this balanced budget amendment necessary? We've been told it's the only way to impose the necessary discipline to force Congress to balance the budget. We know that's not true because we balanced the budget under President Clinton. We turned in 4 balanced budgets and ran a surplus. In fact, in 2001, Alan Greenspan, testifying in favor of President Bush's proposed tax cuts, said we had to reduce taxes because we were going to eliminate, pay down the entire national debt in 10 years, and that would be a bad thing, he thought, for various reasons. But that was the danger. We'd pay down and eliminate the national debt. But President Bush and a Republican Congress succeeded in turning that record surplus into record deficits in record time. They did it with 2 huge tax cuts, 2 unfunded wars, a prescription drug benefit that wasn't paid for, and the rejection of the Democratic Congress's pay-as-you-go rule. It was all done off the books. And I have heard the calumny, that it was wild spending by the Obama administration that has brought about our $15 trillion national debt. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you look at non-defense discretionary spending, everything we do other than defense and Social Security and Medicare and veterans benefits and interest on the debt, adjusted for population and for inflation, it hasn't gone up by a nickel since 2001. The fault, dear colleagues, is not in our Constitution. It's in an irresponsible Republican president and an irresponsible Republican Congress. Many of those same Republican members who saw nothing wrong with busting the budget, who sat quietly when Vice President Cheney said that deficits don't matter, now demand this assault on our founding document instead of delivering the votes of sound fiscal policy. We should do our jobs, not wreck the Constitution and the economy with snake oil cures like this. I urge a no vote, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina raise?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 470, resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 3094 to amend the National Labor Relations Act with respect to representation hearings and the timing of elections of labor organizations under that act.
Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from
Mr.
Texas
Speaker, I'll
raise?
yield myself 15 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say to the gentleman from Michigan who spoke earlier that I agree with him. Today is not 1995. In fact, the deficit is worse. Since 1995, the deficit has tripled. It's gone from $5 trillion to $15 trillion, which is all the more reason to support this balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield 5 minutes to my friend and colleague from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte, who is the sponsor of this resolution.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, this chart tells the story. we have had a number of opportunities over the years to pass balanced budget amendments to the United States Constitution. It's not my idea. It's not a new idea. But as we've gone through time, we've managed debt. Now, as the chairman just noted, in the last 15 years, the debt has tripled. But looking ahead, this chart, which shows the ratio of our debt to our gross domestic product, and shows that by 2080, it will be nine times the total economic output of our country, indicates that what some on the other side have said simply is not the case. Congress has not made the tough decisions. We have overpromised the American people, and the fact of the matter is, now we need to have something in the Constitution that the American people expect and demand of us, and that is a balanced budget amendment. Now, we have lots of different balanced budget amendments that have been proposed in this Congress. I think 18 of them that I've seen thus far. And some ask for more stringent requirements, which I very much like, limiting the ability to balance this budget by putting a heavier burden on the American people through taxes, capping the amount of money that we spend, certainly something that I also think we need to be cognizant of. Others have said, let's take certain things off the table, like Social Security or capital spending or disaster spending. This balanced budget amendment, which passed this House with 300 votes, including 72 Democrats, strikes the right balance. It enshrines in our Constitution the principle that we should live within our means, but gives future Congresses the flexibility to, in times of national emergency, have some years that are not balanced. That, I think, is a reality that we have to deal with. But the fact of the matter is that in the last 50 years, since 1961, this Congress has balanced the budget of this nation 6 times in 50 years. It should be the other way around. There are certainly 6 years in those 50 that were crises in which you might say we should not balance the budget this year. But when the gentleman from New York says that in good times we should pay down the debt and in tough times we should borrow, that has not been what has happened, because most of those 50 years have been good times. Now, there's another important point to make here. Any amendment to the United States Constitution has to, by its very nature, be bipartisan. It requires a 2/3 majority. And many of my friends on the other side of the aisle have worked very hard to build support on their side of the aisle for this. I especially want to thank Peter DeFazio and Jim Cooper, but many members, the Blue Dogs, have endorsed this balanced budget amendment. But it is necessary to have a bipartisan approach to this. And you know what? This is a bipartisan problem. There have been Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, Republican Congresses and Democratic Congresses that have contributed to those 44 years when we've run deficits. So now today we come and ask for a bipartisan solution to this problem, a solution that, depending upon the poll, 75 to 80% of the American people supports. Congress continues to prove it cannot make the tough decisions on its own. The budget has only been balanced 6 times in 50 years. The American people know what it means to balance their budgets. They are surprised that the Congress does not have this requirement. State governments do. 49 out of 50 states, most of which have it in their constitutions. Local governments have to balance their budgets. Families and businesses have to live within their means, and they can't go more than a few years without living within their means. But to run up a $15 trillion debt, which divided by the population of our country means that the average person today owes more in debt based upon their share of the government's debt than they have in personal income, is a disgrace. This is not only an economic issue. This is not only something that we should be imposing upon future Congresses for economic reasons. This is also a moral issue. This is wrong to borrow money year after year after year, over $1 trillion in each of the last 3 years, so that today the average dollar spent by the federal government, 42% of it, by far the largest share, is borrowed against our children and grandchildren's future. And where does that lead us? It leads us to where Europe is. I thank the chairman. This chart shows government debt as a percentage of GDP for 5 European countries and the United States: Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, and Greece. When Greece first got into their problem last year, they were at 120% of GDP. That's what their debt totaled. Already, just a little over a year later, it's 152% of GDP because their economy is shrinking because of irresponsibility on the part of their government. The United States just this week crossed the 100% line. The United States owes as much in debt as we have the total economic output of this nation for 1 year. It is time to put a halt to this, and the best way to do it is to enshrine in our Constitution a principle we all understand, we all live by, and that is you cannot live like this. You cannot live beyond your means year after year after year. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join this bipartisan effort to enshrine in our Constitution a principle sought by the vast majority of the American people, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased at this time to recognize the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, who ever since she has come to Congress has worked drastically to save and build on Medicare, Social Security, and to create jobs. Nancy Pelosi.
Minority Leader is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his kind words and his great leadership on all of the issues that are important to America's working families. Mr. Speaker, I came to the floor to talk about the balanced budget constitutional amendment, but before I get into my comments specifically to the amendment, I want to acknowledge that the distinguished chairman of the committee, Mr. Smith, has talked about what the deficit was in 1995 and how much bigger it is now, and the distinguished maker of this amendment, this resolution today, Mr. Goodlatte, said about the problem of having such a big national debt. Recognizing those two facts, I want to speak up about them. First of all, if this were just about talking about how we can reduce the deficit, the best way to do that is job creation. We know that. If we want to talk about what happened in the 90s, we have to reference the fact that under President Bill Clinton, the debt that he inherited, the Reagan-Bush deficit that he inherited, he turned around, and 5 of his last budgets of the Clinton budgets were in balance or were in surplus. He put us on a trajectory, he and the growth of jobs in our country, in the public and largely in the private sector, took us to a path, a trajectory of $5.6 trillion in surplus. Along comes President George W. Bush, and in record time he reversed that. It was the biggest turnaround, biggest fiscal turnaround in our nation's history, taking us to over a trajectory over $5 trillion in deficit, an $11 trillion turnaround. 2 unpaid for wars, said the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, said that was because of 2 unpaid wars, the Bush tax cuts, particularly at the high end, which did not create jobs, and a giveaway pharmaceutical bill to the pharmaceutical industry. There was the 3 main reasons for the big fiscal turnaround and how we got deeply in debt. I don't remember a lot of complaint coming from the Republican side of the aisle while President Bush was taking us down this path, as Mr. Goodlatte referenced 2 paths. Well, this is one path that President Bush took us down. And so now we have to deal with that because the deficit is a concern to all of us. We believe that the best way to deal with that is what President Clinton did, to have a great economic agenda to generate jobs. And here we are, 320 days of the Republican majority, nearly 320 days of their majority, and they have taken no action on any serious job-creating bills. Here we go again, debating legislation that will not create jobs. In fact, according to experts, Enactment of this proposed amendment to our Constitution would destroy 15 million jobs, double the unemployment rate, cause the economy to shrink by 17%. As Bruce Bartlett, a former economic advisor to President Ronald Reagan and President George Herbert Walker Bush, said recently, even if we were not in an economic crisis and fighting two wars, a rapid cut in spending of the magnitude would unquestionably throw the economy into recession, just as it did in 1937. This legislation is an attack on our economy. It is an attack on our seniors. According to the Nonpartisan Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, it could result in cuts over 10 years of $750 billion to Medicare and $1.2 trillion in cuts to Social Security. These cuts would be devastating to the 40 million seniors who rely on Medicare and Social Security every day. They are even more draconian than the cuts in the Republican budget, which effectively repeal the Medicare guarantee. And just one week after our nation celebrated Veterans Day, we are debating potentially cutting $85 billion over the next 10 years from veterans' benefits, despite the claims of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that this is not a clean, balanced, but they claim it is a clean, balanced budget amendment. It is not, because this proposed amendment to our Constitution will require a supermajority in both chambers of Congress to raise the debt limit. It puts the full faith and credit of the United States of America in the hands of a minority. This, after we went through all of the stress and strain and uncertainty and a downgrading of our credit rating, when we couldn't even get a majority, and now we're thinking of a supermajority vote for the debt limit increase. Again, that was never a requirement when President Bush was president, that there would be a supermajority to raise the debt limit. This amendment promotes further brinkmanship and uncertainty, enshrining extreme ideology into the Constitution at a time when Americans have been very clear that they expect us to set differences aside and to get to work. It is our duty as members of Congress, indeed we take the oath of office, to be the elected guardians of our Constitution, to protect and defend it, to do no harm to our founding documents. Yet if this proposed amendment is adopted, it will have far-reaching and adverse consequences. Mr. Speaker, as a Democratic president, President Clinton, I repeat, who balanced the budget in the 90s, five of his budgets were in balance or in surplus. We can do it again without harming our Constitution, our economy, our seniors, or our veterans. We must start by creating jobs and strengthening our economic growth, the key to reducing the deficit. It was interesting to me to hear others on the other side of the aisle talk about our children and our responsibility to them. Yes, that's what we said when President Bush was amassing his deficit. I didn't hear anyone on the other side of the aisle talking about that. But this is about our Constitution. So we owe it to the vision of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, the aspirations of our children to get our economic and fiscal house in order. This is the exact wrong way to do it. We must reignite the American dream, and we have work to do that. So let's get to work to create jobs so many more people can achieve the American dream. I urge my colleagues to vote no. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks, who is the chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 4 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, all financial budgets will eventually balance. The choice faced by those of us in Congress is whether we will balance this budget ourselves by the wise policy before us, or whether national bankruptcy and financial ruin will do it for us. From the very day that Barack Obama walked into the White House, he has, with breathtaking arrogance, absolutely ignored economic and financial reality. It took America the first 216 years of its existence to accumulate the debt that Barack Obama has accumulated in the first 3 years of his presidency. He has, in those short 3 years, increased our federal debt by over $4 trillion. Now, just to put that into perspective, Mr. Speaker, if all of a sudden a wave of responsibility swept through this chamber and we stopped all deficit spending today and began to pay installments of $1 million every day to pay down the over $4 trillion in new debt that Barack Obama has created in less than 3 years, it would take us more than 10,000 years to pay that off. And that's if we didn't pay one dime in interest in the process. But you see, Mr. Speaker, we are not paying Mr. Obama's debt down at $1 million per day. We are going deeper into debt at more than 4,000 times that much every day under Mr. Obama's own submitted budget and deficit projections. Mr. Speaker, in an ominous prologue to the vote before us, the national debt surpassed $15 trillion yesterday. Mr. Speaker, we have already tried Mr. Obama's way. We have thoroughly tested Democrat Economics 101, the theory that we can tax and deficit spend ourselves into prosperity, or as Vice President Biden put it, we have to spend money to keep from going bankrupt. Mr. Speaker, that theory has utterly failed. We cannot repeal the laws of mathematics. But now, the seminal moment approaches when each of us in this body will have the rare opportunity to cast a single vote that could pull this nation back from the brink of economic cataclysm. And for the sake of our children and our children's children, I pray that we do the right thing. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Speaker.
Good. The Chair must remind all members that remarks in debate may not engage in personalities towards the President. The Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
What person? The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased now to recognize from Virginia the distinguished gentleman Jim Moran for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have to rise in opposition to this balanced budget amendment. I did vote for a similar measure in 1995, but the events of the last 15 years have brought to mind the axiom, fool me once, your fault, fool me twice, my fault. I could never have imagined, back in 1995, the chaos we experienced this summer, despite the fact that we only needed to obtain a simple majority vote to raise the debt limit, which we raised 17 times during the Reagan administration. That would seem like child's play compared to what we would have to go through if this balanced budget amendment passed. The events of these last 15 years have proved to us that this bill would have dramatic and dangerous consequences for our economic future. It would force the federal government to worsen economic recessions. Since federal revenues fall while human needs rise in economic downturns, this bill would force spending cuts and tax increases at precisely the point when the economy is reeling, potentially turning a manageable downturn into a depression. Essentially, this bill would forbid countercyclical spending. Had this amendment been on the books in 2009, for example, we would not have passed the Economic Recovery Act, which proved to be a critical response to the economic catastrophe that followed the financial crisis. One of the reasons that the Recovery Act was necessary is that state balanced budget amendments forced states to rely on federal funds in order to make up for budget shortfalls that would have prompted cuts right at the time when state economies could least afford them. The federal government was effectively borrowing on behalf of the states that were constitutionally prohibited from doing so. But they desperately needed to in order to maintain their law enforcement, their transportation, and their other responsibilities. Even in Texas, where Republican Governor Perry and the legislature opposed the Recovery Act, federal stimulus funds were used to close 97% of that state's budget gap. Now that those dollars are gone, many states face a very serious budget crisis. Can I have another 30 seconds, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Furthermore, House Resolution 2 would require a 3/5 majority vote to raise the debt ceiling. This would only increase the likelihood of a catastrophic debt default like the one we barely avoided this summer. Given the polarization that we're currently experiencing, I have severe doubts that the required supermajority could be secured either to respond to crises or to raise the debt ceiling. This would give preference to military action over economic crises, requiring only a majority for deficit spending for a war such as the Iraq War, which was never paid for, but a 3/5 majority to respond to domestic economic crisis. If this were enacted in 2012, it would require drastic cuts that would have unintended but dire consequences for our struggling economy.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
It's the wrong medicine for today's ailing economy. Thank you.
I would remind members to heed the gavel and the time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, who is a distinguished member of the Judiciary Committee.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Chairman Smith for his leadership on this issue and so many others on judiciary. Mr. Speaker, when Odysseus was returning from the Trojan War, he was passing the islands where the sirens sang, and many a sailor had succumbed to their sweet melodious sound and died. So Odysseus made his men put wax in their ears, and he made them tie him to the mast. Against his will, he made them tie him up, and he did it because he lacked the will to restrain himself. And when people take our freedom, we recoil. But when we've proven ourselves to be wholly incapable of exercising that freedom, we should give it up. Congress has proven itself to be hopelessly incapable of balancing the budget. We need to be made to do so because we cannot bring ourselves to make the hard decisions required. As my colleague and friend who's been a leader on this issue, Mr. Goodlatte, mentioned in his remarks, 6 times in 50 years is laughable. You would do better than 6 out of 50 if you just guessed. 6 out of 50 is laughable. We are incapable of balancing our own budget. And when South Carolina, Mr. Speaker, which does have a balanced budget requirement, was facing tough economic times, we had to cut public safety money to prosecutors. I had to cut and furlough employees who were making $19,000 a year. I had to furlough prosecutors who had $100,000 in student loans for 7 days. That's a hard decision to make, but we had to do it for fiscal health. We need to make hard decisions, even if they're career-ending decisions in this body, and we have proven ourselves incapable of doing it, so we must bind ourselves, even against our will. If I could have 10 more seconds, Mr. Speaker.
I'll yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, we are $15 trillion in debt. We need to tie ourselves up before we wreck this republic. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased at this time to recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, the distinguished leader in the Congress, Bill Pascrell, for 3 minutes.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this attempt to change the Constitution of the United States is a real disaster. We all want to make sure we balance the budgets. But to compare our household budget to the national budget is preposterous. because we have different responsibilities as the federal government. Alexander Hamilton, who wrote so many of the Federalist Papers, I thought we understand, a great leader, a great American. I thought we understood what the responsibilities of government are. But talking about disasters, what about natural disasters? How would a balanced budget amendment affect how the Congress looks at when there is a tornado in Joplin, a wipeout and flooding in New Jersey, a hurricane in Florida, wildfires in Texas? The amendment requires this balanced budget amendment, which is a joke to begin with, how you named it. It doesn't balance the budget. And if the amendment ever got through, it would take 7 years to implement. We have people out of work now. But anyway, the amendment requires a supermajority for every emergency spending in the case of natural disasters. Let's take my state of New Jersey. FEMA estimates that it will provide $400 million to help communities and individuals across the state recover and rebuild. Last September, we couldn't even get a majority, let alone a supermajority, to pass disaster aid unless it was offset with partisan budget cuts. Every state will have to go through that. I want every state to know. You talk about the states. You talk about their budgets. Isn't it interesting that on January of this year, CBO Director Douglas Elmendorf, he wrote this: amending the Constitution to require this sort of balance raises risks. Listen, my friends, and my brothers and sisters, the fact that taxes fall when the economy weakens and spending and benefit programs increase, by nature, they have to. People need help, unless we're no longer going to be a first-rate republic. When the economy weakens in an automatic way under existing law, is an important stabilizing force for the aggregate economy. The fact that state governments need to work against these effects in their own budgets, need to take action to raise taxes.
30 additional seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you. The fact that state governments need to work against these effects in their own budgets, need to take action to raise taxes or cut spending in recessions, undoes the automatic stabilizers essentially at the state level. Taking those away at the federal level risks making the economy less stable, risks exacerbating the swings in business cycles. We did it together, Democrats and Republicans, 98, 99, 2000. We did it without an amendment to the Constitution, which will undermine this institution that we so rever right here today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Texas. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield 2 minutes to my friend from California, Mr. Herger, who is a member of the Ways and Means Committee.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the American people understand the basic principle that you can't spend money you don't have. They live that reality on a daily basis. Unfortunately, Congress has disregarded this idea, choosing instead to imagine that it could spend money endlessly without harming our economy or standard of living. The result is that we're now an unthinkable $15 trillion in debt. Some argue that we don't need to amend the Constitution for Washington to do its job. I'm proud to say that I served on a budget committee in the late 1990s when we produced 4 consecutive balanced budgets. But the sad truth is that this kind of fiscal responsibility has been all too rare in recent years. Ultimately, a balanced budget amendment will force Congress to be serious about addressing the core driver of our debt, which is the out-of-control growth of federal entitlement spending. As the President has acknowledged, no taxpayer would be willing to pay the amount required to sustain the exponential growth of entitlements, and no amount of budget gimmicks can hide this serious crisis. A balanced budget is a common-sense idea that governs our personal lives, and it should also be at the heart of how Congress operates. I strongly support the balanced budget amendment, and I urge the House to pass it.
It's expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to recognize Judy Chu, a member of the Judiciary Committee from California, for 3 minutes.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Proponents of this bill claim that it's about fiscal responsibility, but it is the opposite. This bill makes it impossible, in fact, unconstitutional, for the government to save for the future. Under this bill, programs like Social Security or long-term federal highway projects would have to be completely eliminated to comply with the Constitution. Today, American workers put money into a Social Security trust fund built to pay and save for future benefits. But under this short-sighted constitutional amendment, money coming into the federal government must be paid out the same year. That means you can't have a Social Security trust fund. So goodbye Social Security, goodbye savings for retirement. Let me tell you how bad this idea is. Let's say for a moment that this was your family's budget. If this constitutional budget amendment applied to you, you would have to spend everything you earn in the same year. No college fund or IRA, no savings account to put a down payment on a house or, God forbid, to pay for expensive medical treatment. Not only is that ludicrous, it is tragic. If that weren't bad enough, if this constitutional amendment goes through and no revenues are raised, all government programs will suffer a 17.3% cut. That's a $1.2 trillion reduction in Social Security payments through 2021. That is nearly a 20% reduction that would directly hurt current and future retirees and senior citizens for the next decade. This so-called balanced budget amendment balances overzealous budget slashing on the backs of our senior citizens and future retirees. Does Congress really want to send the message now, in the midst of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, that saving responsibly for the future is unconstitutional? Is Congress prepared to abandon millions of Americans now? I, for one, am not. And so I urge my colleagues to oppose this reckless constitutional amendment.
The gentlelady yields back her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte.
The gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the Chairman. I just want to make it very clear that some inaccurate assertions have been made about the protection of Social Security and highway trust funds. The funds can be spent each year, and then any excess funds that need to be retained can be put into a rainy day fund. And so a Social Security trust fund or another type of fund like that is perfectly permissible under this provision. What is not permissible is continuing to run up debt year after year after year, and that is what endangers Social Security and Medicare and important programs for our senior citizens, and that's why this amendment is needed to protect them.
Has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow, who is a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to particularly thank the Chairman for yielding me time to speak in support of the Balanced Budget Amendment. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Balanced Budget Amendment, which I've supported since I first came to Congress. We all agree that our nation's debt is unsustainable. Our economy is struggling, and folks everywhere are struggling to find work. But facts are stubborn things, and it's a fact that balancing the budget is essential if we're going to protect our future and the future of our children and grandchildren. Balancing the budget will also create the long-term stability our economy needs to fully recover. Amending our Constitution is not something to take lightly. We shouldn't do it on a whim or because it's politically expedient. Amending the Constitution is something that we as a nation should undertake only when it is truly needed. Unfortunately, Congress has demonstrated time and again that it cannot and will not balance the budget on its own. It is truly needed now. Nearly every state in the Union has a balanced budget amendment. Families throughout America have to bring their income and outlays into balance, and so can the federal government. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is bipartisan, it is responsible, it is the right thing to do, and I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will join me and the Blue Dog Coalition in supporting the balanced budget amendment. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Jerry Nadler for 1 minute.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have to correct what the distinguished gentleman from Virginia said a moment ago when he said that this amendment would not affect Social Security because Social Security would be paid for by the trust funds. This amendment says the total outlays cannot exceed receipts. Total outlays should include all outlays of the United States government except for those for repayment of debt principal. That includes Social Security, which the courts have held is not a debt. Therefore, Social Security would have to be paid out of the same amounts, and they would be counted against the overall outlays when calculating whether the budget's in balance, something that's not the case today. It would throw the budget further out of balance and would require deeper cuts. If this amendment were in effect today, Medicare would have to be cut by $750 billion, Social Security by $1.2 trillion, veterans benefits by $85 billion through 2021. Despite anything anyone may say on this floor, that's the simple truth about this amendment. I yield back.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Shelley Berkeley of Nevada, 2 minutes.
The gentlelady from Nevada is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this dangerous balanced budget constitutional amendment. We all agree that we must get America's fiscal house in order by cutting spending and balancing our budget. Nevada families know this. Families across Nevada are doing it by tightening their belts and making great sacrifices. The United States government should be able to do the same. However, this balanced budget amendment is wrong for Nevada and it's wrong for the rest of the country. It would force massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. But big oil companies and corporations that ship jobs overseas aren't asked to sacrifice 1 penny under this balanced budget amendment. That's just not right. But this is what the American people have come to expect from this Congress. Washington Republicans supported a radical budget proposal, the Ryan budget, that kills Medicare by turning it over to private insurance companies. Now they're supporting a plan that slashes Social Security and Medicare benefits that seniors rely on. It's a question of priorities. I strongly believe that we need to get our deficit under control, and I believe that a version of the balanced budget amendment could be one way to achieve that. But I cannot and I will not support a balanced budget amendment that doesn't include ironclad protections for Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. We should not be balancing our nation's budget on the backs of our seniors and our vets. This balanced budget amendment may be good politics for some, but it is not good policy for America. And I urge my colleagues to join me in voting no on this attack on our seniors and our veterans. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lankford, who is also a member of the Government Reform Committee.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 27 times the United States Constitution has been amended. It's something we do rarely. It's something that we should think through in the process. We do it only because it is absolutely required, and we have common agreement across the House, the Senate, and the American people. This is one of those moments. If you ask most every American on the street, should we balance our budget, they will nod their head. And if you ask them again, should we force Congress to balance the budget, again, they will nod their head and say, yes, this is something we should do. There's common agreement across the American people because it's common sense. It's hard to explain to any family or any business why they have to balance their budget, but Congress does not. It is the ultimate exemption for members of Congress, that they can spend as much as they want, as often as they would like, without any retribution. I hear all the doomsday statements that if we balanced our budget, what would possibly happen if we had to live within our means? It makes me smile and say, just like every business, every family, we have to make hard choices and we have to do it. But it's not what doomsday prediction happens if we balance our budget. It is look up across the ocean at what is happening in Europe right now to nations that did not balance their budget. And if for some reason we think as Americans we can run up as much debt as we would like with no consequence, we are fooling ourselves. The doomsday is coming. We must put a boundary around the United States Congress to be able to balance our budget. In 1995, when this failed by one vote, we will forever regret that if this occurs again. It's time for us to balance our budget once and for all. With that, I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman